Peace, 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 peace. What's good? We're here live right now on X, live right now on YouTube. Peace to everybody. Welcome to the Signature Move with A.O. Baker. My name is A.O. We're going to talk a little bit of wrestling, what happened this past weekend. A lot of good things happened. Two things in particular. One from Thursday's press conference, the WWE kickoff, and then, of course, New Japan, which was on my birthday, by the way. Appreciate everybody with all of the well wishes, the birthday wishes. But New Japan, the new beginning this past weekend, I caught it live. I stayed up, went to sleep, woke back up, and made sure I caught that live. So I'm breaking down, for starters, Zack Sabre Jr. versus Bryan Danielson, which was a phenomenal match. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, you're behind by 3 as far as I'm concerned, because I've already watched it a good 2 or 3 times. Took my notes. I'm going to break that match down. And then I have an interesting point of view. A lot of people have been talking about how this Bloodline storyline, this main event that's supposed to be happening, finally getting Cody versus Roman at the main event of WrestleMania, how that wasn't the plan and how they really pivoted. If they're ever going to make an argument for this being the plan all along, I'm going to be the one to make that argument. So I'll make it to you. We could get this show started right now. Let's go. It's a signature move. 10 times out of 10 I'm right. With this pen I write the thoughts of a genius, verified that I'm nice. My quotables are quotable, just ask me the price. Legend in 2 games, Steve Stout on the mic. I stand on my square, whatever circle I'm in. Circle the block before I step in the spot in this world of sin. Ain't here to be a victim, a villain. I'm here for business, sipping light beer like Mance Warner and pure denim.
Shook, got them spinning they boots. It get crazy when I get in the mood. Don't talk to me, dog, until you finish your food. Hope your image approved. Never been in it to lose. Before we finish them, we hit them with the signature move.
Go. Once again, peace, cheers to y'all. Nah, I mean, hope everybody out there is doing all right. Once again, my name is A.O. Baker. Right now, you're tuned in to the Signature Move. We're live right now on X. We're also live on the Ringside Club YouTube channel, so make sure you tap in. Of course, the Ringside Club goes live every Thursday, somewhere between the hours of 9 and 10. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you do so. And if you don't catch live, you can catch the on-demand on all your usual podcast platforms, plus our YouTube page, plus my YouTube page. All the links, everything you need to know is going to be in the bio. We don't need to, in the show notes. We don't need to worry too much about that right now. What we need to worry about, what we need to talk about, what we need to discuss, aside from checking in and following me everywhere at I am A.O. Baker, is this masterpiece of a match that happened this past weekend at New Japan, the new beginning. Over the weekend, they had a fire match. First of all, the card, there was a lot of notable matches and happenings and storyline advancements that happened this past weekend. We saw the final, or what appears to be the final matchup between Okada and Tanahashi. They've had a feud that's going on for 10, 12, 14 years, something along those lines. So a lot of emotion. We saw Will Ospreay's final match as a contracted New Japan guy in a 5-on-5, almost a war game style cage match between his crew, the United Empire, and Bullet Club War Dogs. A lot of blood, a lot of violence, a lot of weapons. We don't see cage matches often, if ever. You know, this is the first time I've seen a cage match in New Japan. So a lot happened on that card, and if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I was up live. It was my birthday, and one of the things I wanted to do specifically for my birthday was just chill and watch this live, you know? So I did that. But Zack Sabre Jr. versus Bryan Danielson had a masterpiece of a match, and they're building a masterpiece of a feud that goes all the way back to 2008. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it, hopefully these aren't spoilers. If you have had a chance to watch it, you already know what I'm about to say, that this was a match that you need to watch. So let's break it down. First of all, the history is very simple. There were 2 previous matches. Like I mentioned, they started back in 2008. They had a matchup. It looked like it was in a hotel lobby or a pub or something like that. Zack Sabre Jr. was 20 years old, so he was a rookie facing who was already, I think Bryan is about 6 years old. So let's say 26, Bryan Danielson. By the time he reached 26, he was already one of the best in the world. He was already doing this thing in Ring of Honor, across the indies, having amazing feuds with a bunch of people. Everybody knew who Bryan Danielson was, and this was prior to him going to WWE. But all of the wrestling heads, all of the people that really studied this shit knew that Bryan Danielson was one of those ones by then. And Zack Sabre Jr. was brand new. Like I mentioned, he was 20 years old. He's already not the biggest guy now in 2024. He was even skinnier back then. He was like the size of my arm back then. You know what I mean? So you have this brand new, wet behind the ears guy get a chance to have a matchup. It turned out to be a best 2 out of 3 falls match. And not to jump ahead of myself, but in the post-show comments from this past weekend, Zack Sabre Jr. gave so much credit to this match being what kind of set his career off on the trajectory that it went on. It was the inspiration that he got from having a match against Bryan Danielson that led him to go to Germany, that led him to being discovered by Pro Wrestling Noah, being invited to the Pro Wrestling Noah dojo, and eventually making his way to New Japan as part of Suzuki-gun, and now we see him as the front man, shall we say, of the mighty Don't Kneel. But all the way back, he has this 2 out of 3 falls match. Bryan goes on to win it. About a year later, they have a match in WXW over in Germany. It was part of the 16-karat gold tournament, and Sabre actually won this match. And this is the only match that I haven't seen. I got to go back and watch this, but I saw the first one. I obviously saw the match that they had with each other at Wrestle Dream last year. We'll touch on that. And then, the match that we saw over this past weekend. The story really picks up. Aside from all of that inspirational, and it was fighting you that led my career on this trajectory, this picks up last year. Bryan won that match at Wrestle Dream. It was actually supposed to happen the prior year, but Bryan was injured. It was supposed to happen at the first Forbidden Door, and that led to Claudio Castagnoli making his debut. But Bryan versus Sabre last year at Wrestle Dream ended by a Busaiku knee that pretty much knocked Zack Sabre Jr. out. And because this was supposed to be a match to determine who was the best technical wrestler, Sabre Jr. couldn't accept that. He couldn't accept that as the way that match ended. We were supposed to win by submission and submission only. So you kind of violated the rules. You violated the code of this secret society of technical wrestlers. So he didn't accept it. He didn't shake his hand at the end of that match. He didn't accept that as the way that match should have ended. And he challenged him to another one. So fast forward, February 11th, the new beginning in Osaka. Shouts to Chris Charlton and Walker Stewart, though they were the two that were on commentary on the English feed on New Japan World. Match went about a half hour, a little over a half hour, 32 minutes and some odd seconds. So let's go beat by beat. I took some notes, man. And for everybody that says that stories don't happen in matches, you're just not watching close enough, or you're not paying enough attention, because there was so much. Again, all you need is the backstory of Zack Sabre Jr. looked up to Bryan. He was inspired by Bryan. He had a match with Bryan that set his career off on the trajectory that, it inspired him to go even harder. So that's story beat number 1. Story beat number 2, last year, the 2 best technical wrestlers in the world were supposed to have a match, according to Sabre, that was going to determine that by submission and by submission only. And because Bryan won with a knee and a pinfall, violated those rules of this secret society. So they started out pretty much feeling each other out for the first few minutes of this match. It was pretty much a stalemate. It was counters on counters. They would, somebody would hit a move, somebody would counter that move, somebody would counter the counter, and this went back and forth for a little bit. They made a note on commentary that in catch wrestling, which again, the code of technical wrestler starts with this catch wrestling. You sometimes attempt to pin, not necessarily to win the match, but just to set up an opportunity for a submission. You know what I mean? For it to grab a hold. So, for example, you'll lock somebody in some sort of a pinning combination, and once they throw their shoulder up, now there's a free arm for that person to grab and try to twist and turn in some kind of way that's going to lead to a submission victory. This is pretty much why, like I mentioned, Sabre Jr. was disappointed with the first match. They also made mention that these two, they might be evenly matched, but they still do have slightly different styles. And Sabre might be a little bit better of an improvisational wrestler. It's almost like jazz music or rap, how, the flow can move depending on what the beat does, or, a jazz musician is playing and another jazz musician just jumps in and finds that pocket. Sabre Jr. might be a little bit better at the improv aspect of pro wrestling than Danielson is, because Danielson might come in with a little bit more of a game plan. Sabre doesn't really have game plans. If he attacks a limb and you throw something up, he'll grab that limb. And you also notice, if you watch a lot of Sabre Jr.'s matches, he's moving. If he grabs you in a submission and you don't tap out in 5, 6, 7 seconds, he's moving on to grab another limb and try another move. So there's just some interesting little notes and nuggets from the commentary team. At 8 minutes and 30 seconds, just about, this is where the next story beat of this match kind of takes place. Zack Sabre Jr. grabbed his left ankle or his shin for the first time, right? And this happened about 20 seconds later. Bryan hits Sabre Jr. with a snapmare, and both of Sabre's legs hit the bottom rope, pretty violently. So he was already limping. A couple of seconds later, he gets snap-mared pretty quickly, pretty sharply into the bottom rope. Anybody that knows those ropes, you look at them and it seems like it's real easy to hit. Those hurt. Those ropes hurt. Anybody that's ever, and this isn't me speaking from experience, just listening to a bunch of people that have wrestled, the ropes don't necessarily feel good. So when you already have an injury like Sabre Jr.'s left shin or ankle area, his leg was already hurt, that snap mare really, really quick into the bottom ropes, it didn't feel good. You know what I mean? So now Danielson has his target. For the rest of the match, Danielson almost stubbornly, they made mention of this on commentary also, that it was almost stubbornly that Bryan Danielson just kind of went to the well maybe one too many times, a bit of a foreshadow. Went to the well one too many times because he was really had his sights on the target of the injured limb, the left leg of Zack Sabre Jr. Moving forward, we see that Bryan traps Sabre's legs in a Romero special. And here's where we go into a little bit of the saltiness of Bryan Danielson, a little bit more aggressive, not necessarily just sportsmanlike or sportsmanship for the sake of competition. He was annoyed that Sabre didn't shake his hand last match. So now he's taking it up another level as far as being aggressive. If you notice, there was one period where Sabre was pretty much close enough to grab the ropes, but he shakes his head. It's too much pride. Not only does he want to win by submission, but he wants to figure out a way, if he's caught in a submission move, he wants to figure out a way to maneuver out of it instead of just grabbing the ropes. It's just like a too easy of a way to get out of this hold. So he doesn't want to grab the ropes. Bryan sees this. He starts smacking Sabre in the back of the head. He's yelling at him now. Yo, go ahead, grab the ropes. Sabre says, nah, I don't have to grab the fucking ropes. Bryan says, all right, bet. He proceeds, he's in the Romero special, which if you don't know the move by heart, this is when, you kind of trap one leg behind the right leg, you have the left leg behind your left leg, and he's about to kind of, rock back and lock him into a bit of a surfboard. But he doesn't grab his arms right now. He's just standing on the back of his knees. And right now, then he just jumps up and steps on the back of Sabre Jr.'s knees right into the mat. So now we have sportsmanship. All that gentleman shit is completely out of the window. That aggression. He rolls Zack Sabre Jr. moving forward a little bit near the ropes now. And he places one of Zack Sabre Jr.'s legs on the bottom rope, right? So just look at the treachery here. He puts Sabre's leg on the rope on purpose because he knows the ref is going to call for a rope break, right? He knows that Sabre isn't going to grab the rope himself, so he puts one of Zack's legs on the bottom rope. He forces the ref to kind of change positions, right? He says he can't break, or the ref calls for a break. He says he can't break because Sabre has control of one of his arms. So now the ref switches positions and he goes over to talk to Sabre Jr. You got to let go. As soon as he lets go, he does that old Bret Hart move where he jumps off of the rope and lands with all of his body weight, almost like a bonsai drop, onto that injured limb. Again, maybe underhanded tactics, maybe some extra aggression, but now we're starting to hear boos from the crowd. That Osaka crowd, that New Japan crowd, they're booing Bryan Danielson at this point. They're right behind Sabre Jr. Sabre's been here. He's learned Japanese. He's been with New Japan for I don't know how many years, but for a very, very long time. Bryan Danielson might be seen as a bit of an outsider, even though that he's like obviously a big star, did his thing over in WWE, global superstar. He's not home. He's not at home the same way that Zack Sabre Jr. is at home. So the fans are booing now. Now there's a vicious pair of dragon screw leg whips. Now they're trading ankle locks and escapes. Bryan traps Sabre's legs for another Romero special, but this time he digs his fingers in the Zack's nose and his eyes. He breaks it forward. That old I got till 5 ref. Again, more aggression. A few closed fists to Sabre's sides, both sides, forcing his arms to go back, and now he gets him in the Romero special. He leans all the way back. He puts him in a dragon sleeper. Like this is getting really, really aggressive, and we're starting to feel for Zack. They've been going back and forth for a little bit, but up till right now, if you were going to score this on points and as far as who had the advantage, 1,000% you're going to give that to Bryan. So commentary, again, is noting that Bryan might be stubbornly going for Zack Sabre Jr.'s leg too much at this point. He's going to the well too many times. And you also see that Bryan has the advantage if they're evenly matching the submission game, which I would give that maybe a little bit to Zack because he seems to pull more out of his bag. As far as striking goes, you're going to give the striking advantage to Bryan Danielson. He has the kicks, he has the European uppercuts, even though both of them have a really good European uppercut. Those forearms to the neck. It seems to be that there's a little bit more power that comes from Bryan strikes than some of Sabre strikes. Another beautiful transition here. So fast forward again a little bit. Sabre transitions. He locks Bryan into a cobra twist, and then transitions into an octopus hold. If you just pay attention and watch like the footwork and the positioning of how he moves his foot and what he does with Bryan's arm, he just transitions so beautifully from a cobra twist to an octopus hold, and then Bryan counters that into a stretch muffler. And this is the moment that I saw a lot of people sharing on social. At this point, they were kind of locked on the mat. They each had a limb, and they're kind of sitting, almost face to face with one another. Back to a stalemate. The same way we had a stalemate in the first, the opening minutes of this match. We're now back at a stalemate at this point in the match, and we see that they start slapping each other. Now they're kicking each other. Bryan is spitting in Zack's face at this point. He starts laughing at at Zack. He spits in his face, and now they're trading kicks to the face. Kick, 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 and they, simultaneously kicking. It almost looks as though they knocked each other out. At this point, we get "This is awesome" chants. For those of you that say that New Japan crowds are quiet, it's not that they're quiet for the sake of being quiet. You have to impress them. You have to impress these crowds because they've seen the highest level of professional wrestling over the years, and this is now like they're seeing high caliber art at this point, right? So you get a "This is awesome" chant from the New Japan crowd. We see an arm trap single leg crab. This forces, you know what? I think I skipped something. Earlier in the match, there was a move that Sabre, here we go. Sabre had Bryan in like a figure four. Then he traps him in a heel hook. He has his left arm trap. He's twisting him in a pretzel. He has his legs crossed, heel hook. His left arm is back. And the only thing at this point that Bryan can do is grab the bottom rope. This is the first rope break of the match. And as soon as Bryan grabs the rope and Zack lets go with a hold, you can see that Bryan is visibly pissed off with himself, though. He's almost disappointed in himself for having to resort to, again, breaking that code of technical wrestling. He grabs the rope to escape instead of figuring out a way out of the move. You know what I mean? So this is actually what led to those "This is awesome" chants, because this is the story again, continuing from the first match. If you can't beat me by submission, I'm not accepting that. And even though, foreshadowing, this match didn't end by submission, the fact that Bryan had to be the one to grab a rope instead of figuring a way out of the move is almost a moral victory before the actual victory that Sabre got later on. So just pay attention to that, because if that ever comes up, if we end up getting a rubber match out of this most recent, so far 2 matches, if this turns into a recent trilogy, that could be something that comes into play a little bit later on. But again, the first rope break was at the hands of Bryan Danielson, grabbing that bottom rope because he could not figure out a way out of the move that Sabre put him into. So again, fast forward, we had that arm trap single leg crab that Bryan has Sabre trapped in now, and Sabre grabs the rope, right? So they each have a rope break, moral victory over one another. We're getting fight forever chants at this point from the crowd, by the way. The quiet New Japan crowd that doesn't chant for anything. They've now already chanted "This is awesome," and now they're chanting "Fight forever." At one point, Sabre's leg gives, and Bryan catches him with the Busaiko knee. Now, remember, he won that first match last year at Wrestle Dream with a Busaiko knee, but he opts not to take the pin. He hits him with the Busaiko knee clean. He doesn't take the pin. He's hitting some yes chants, and the crowd is chanting with him now. He goes over into the corner. He's hitting the yes chants. Crowd is with him, and he's pretty much waiting for Sabre to get up so he can hit him with a second one. He goes for the Busaiko knee for the second one, and he counters into a pinfall attempt. And now they're kind of trading pinfall attempts. Sabre finally catches Bryan with a crucifix for the 1, for the 2, for the 3. And although it's not by submission, your winner at 32 minutes and some odd seconds of I hate to say modern day instant classic, but I'm going to go ahead and give this the classic. 32 minutes, some odd seconds. Sabre with the 1, 2, 3 with the victory. So now we're tied 1-1. Again, Bryan won last year. Sabre wins this one. Bryan goes to, Sabre goes to shake Bryan's hand. He walks off, thinks about it for a second, walks back, and now he offers his hand. They shake hands. Bryan raises Sabre's hand, presents him to the crowd. They bow, and then Bryan leaves the ring and leaves the ring to Zack Sabre Jr. When he's walking to the back, he gets out of the ring. First of all, he makes that motion like championship. He motions like that old Aaron Rodgers joint was on the commercials. He makes the motion championship, and then he gets out of the ring and he calls out Sonata and Naito. He's coming for him. So we have the post-match comments. First with Bryan, he says he's not disappointed because even his eye is 100% healed. His arm is 100% healed. He gave Sabre his all. Everything he had to give Sabre in this match, he gave it to him. And pretty much Sabre was just a better man tonight. And not only is he the better man, but he's going to go ahead and concede the fact that maybe, just maybe, Sabre is in fact the best best technical wrestler, the best technical wrestler. It's not him anymore. Now it's Zack Sabre Jr. He says he hopes the fans of New Japan appreciate Sabre because he's really that special. Not only says he's the best technical wrestler today, but he says he's the best technical wrestler that he's even been ever been in the ring with. So somebody makes a mention, you didn't tap out. He says, you know what? Because there wasn't a tap out, they might have to run this back, do a 2 out of 3 falls match on neutral ground. And then he walks off and says he loves New Japan. So let's hold this neutral ground thing. It could be a forbidden door. Neutral ground would make sense because it's an AEW and New Japan co-promoted event. Could be a Ring of Honor because that's not really either man's like home promotion right now. Plus, Ring of Honor is the home of Pure Rules. So what better way to find out, who the better technical wrestler is by submission than in a Pure Rules match that's synonymous with Ring of Honor. Could also be CMLL because he mentioned 2 out of 3 falls. 2 out of 3 falls are way more prominent in Mexico. And CMLL has a relationship, obviously, with New Japan and a more recent relationship with AEW. So we'll see. I saw somebody say it might be TNA. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But again, like I mentioned, Forbidden Door makes sense. Ring of Honor would make sense. CMLL would make sense. But at some point between now and let's say maybe August, when Bryan is wrapping up from being a full-time pro wrestler, I feel like they're going to run it back, and we'll see. We'll see. Sabre, he had his backstage comments. He says he's pretty much been linked to Bryan since day one. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, first of all, back in 2002, right after ECW goes out of business and they were bought by WWE and WCW the same, everybody was obsessed with like hardcore matches and death matches. But Sabre was obsessed with Japanese wrestling and technical wrestling, and Bryan was the guy, at least from an American standpoint, an American pro wrestling standpoint, that was most influential and most inspirational when Sabre was first starting out and wanted to get into pro wrestling. So he says from back in 2002, he was inspired by him. Obviously, they had that 2008 match. But he's been inspired by Bryan for doing the same things or bringing the same things to pro wrestling that Sabre's been trying to bring, and that's dignity, respect, technique, and honor. He says pro wrestling is a sport. Like, yeah, it's supposed to be entertaining, but first and foremost, it's supposed to be a sport, and then it becomes entertaining when you have people of the highest quality and the highest caliber doing what they do. Goes on to talk about their match in 2008. He says in front of about 45 people and a few of their pets. He says Bryan could have beaten them in about 5 minutes, but instead he gave them the lesson of a lifetime. And again, like I mentioned, that changed the trajectory of his career. He says Bryan went on to the largest pro wrestling company in the world, referring to WWE, that refuses to call it pro wrestling, right? WWE doesn't call it. They call it sports entertainment. The biggest pro wrestling company in the world calls it sports entertainment. And even through that and every other obstacle that they threw at Bryan, he managed to become the most important pro wrestler in the world. So he's just giving it up to him, giving up as much props as he can. He says in that time, he's speaking about himself now. Sabre says in that time, he's turned down every single offer from every single company because for him, it's not about wrestling. It's about sport. It's not about money. It's about sport. And he says, he goes on to close and says later on this year that he will become the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Again, if you have not had a chance, had an opportunity to watch this live, you're doing yourself a disservice. Make sure you check it out. New Japan World. I'm already on my 3rd watch. Instant classic. And this is turning out, this is right up my alley. Anybody that listens to us regularly on the Ringside Club knows that Sabre's my favorite wrestler. You know, I'm a fan of Bryan's work. He's one of my favorite wrestlers. I'm a fan of guys like Lee Moriarty, for example, that brings all of that technique on a major stage and doesn't make it like back when Dean Malenko was doing his thing. You see this right here, that's Bret Hart. Like, I'm a fan of these guys, and it's not boring wrestling. It's just very, very high level, intelligent counter, catch can, submissions, some suplexes, you know, the New Japan in the logo right above the lion mark says King of Sports because Inoki wanted to prove that professional wrestling was the most important form of fighting, the most important form of mixed martial arts, and the best guys do it there. So, yeah, man, this is turning into be a great feud. It was my favorite match last year. I see no reason. I don't know if anything's going to beat it this year. The caliber is high. The mark has been set. So, yeah, check that out. Sabre Jr. versus Danielson at New Beginning from this past weekend. Moving along, this is about the halfway point. Last week on Thursday on YouTube, right? On YouTube, not on SmackDown, not on Monday Night Raw, on YouTube, on WWE's YouTube channel, they had the WrestleMania kickoff, the WrestleMania 40 kickoff, and this was billed as pretty much like a press conference style thing. They're in the Endeavor family, TKO. We see these press conferences before big fights all the time with UFC. So I don't know if this was something that they took from the UFC playbook or something that they wanted to do just for the sake of doing something cool and doing something different. Whoever brought this idea to the table, whoever brought the idea of broadcasting it live and making this as realistic as possible, kudos. Hats off to you. Salute and cheers to you, because this was probably my favorite WWE segment in years, and it had everything to do with the fact that this didn't feel like it came out of a can. It didn't feel like it was part of just something that they do and it's scripted and blah, blah, blah. This turned into some really, really good television as far as YouTube goes and as far as WWE goes. So a lot of people have been saying that this was WWE's pivot because they messed up with the main event storyline for WrestleMania. Once The Rock came out the week prior on SmackDown and kind of took the stage and took the spotlight and took the main event, so we believed at that time, from Cody Rhodes with that face-off with Roman Reigns. A lot of people said they were making a mistake. Then we see, a lot of these fans took it a bit too far as making death threats towards The Rock's daughter and all of that. That's like corny as shit. But as far as like just the feedback from the fans being that invested in Cody's story and then opting to say that, nah, we don't want The Rock against Roman this way. We do want The Rock against Roman. We don't want it this way. We want Cody to, hashtag finish your story, that kind of shit. A lot of people said this couldn't have been the way that WWE planned for all of this to go. Now, I'm not saying that this is or this isn't. All I'm saying is the following. If WWE ever wants to say that this was planned from A to Z, the way that they wanted it to go, and they did this on purpose because they knew the fans were going to react negatively, but they wanted to do something more interesting. If they're ever going to say that this was the plan, I'm going to make that argument right now. Now, the key word for this, as I take a swift swig of a working man's beverage real quick. The key word right here is motivation. You have to understand the motivation for all of the main characters involved in this story. There's only 3. You might think there's 4, but there's only 3 motivations, 3 character motivations that actually matter, that actually prove that this was planned all along. First off, Cody Rhodes. We already know what his motivation is. He's here because he wants to win that title that his father was robbed out of. And the title is the one that Roman Reigns currently holds, right? It's the WWE Universal Championship, the lineage that goes all the way back to when Dusty Rhodes wrestled in WWE or F or whatever the case was. It's the title that his father never held. So his idea, his way of finishing that story and bringing his family story full circle is to hold that championship. But we already knew that. The next person's motivation that you have to understand is Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins' motivation is he wants to main event WrestleMania because he's never main evented a WrestleMania. He's pretty much done everything else, but he hasn't main evented a WrestleMania. Look at all of these manias, right? 29 and 30, WrestleMania 29 and 30, he wrestled as 1/3 of the Shield. No main event. 31, he lost to Orton, but he cashed in on Roman and Brock in the main event. So this was Roman and Brock's main event, right? That wasn't Rollins' main event. He cashed in. heist of the century and that whole thing. But that wasn't billed or promoted as a Seth Rollins main event. 32, he missed because of injury. 33, he came back. He beat Triple H. WrestleMania 34, he beat The Miz and Finn Balor for the IC title. None of these are main events. WrestleMania 35, Seth Rollins opened the pay-per-view. Universal Championship opened the pay-per-view. And he beat Brock for that title, right? So even the Universal Championship match was not the main event, even though Seth Rollins was a part of it. No main event. Opened. So that was 35. WrestleMania 36, he lost to Kevin Owens in a no DQ match. Not a main event. 37, lost to Cesaro on night 1 of Mania. Not a main event. 38, he lost to Cody. Not a main event. And 39, last year, he beat Logan Paul. And that, of course, was not a main event. So the motivation of Cody Rhodes, he wants that title his pops never had. The motivation of Seth Rollins, he wants to main event in WrestleMania. The third and last character motivation is The Rock. It's not Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns' character motivation at this point is irrelevant. You know why? Because The Rock is the high chief. When they had this press conference on Thursday, if you zoomed in, and I was the first person, at least that I saw, that took a screenshot, and with the little red pen tool on the phone, I circled The Rock's name. I zoomed in on The Rock, circled the name. It says High Chief, because in real life, he is a High Chief. I heard somebody say it might have been for about 10 years by now. He's a High Chief. So all that tribal chief, all that head of the table, all of that's cute. But really, the Don Corleone of this whole thing is The Rock, the High Chief. So what's his motivation? Don Corleone's motivation in The Godfather was the best for his family. That's the same motivation for The Rock, right? The Rock wants the best for the Samoan dynasty, the bloodline, the Anoa'i family. The Rock is the top guy in that family, and his motivation is that he wants the best. So when you look at Roman Reigns, as far as The Rock is concerned, Roman Reigns is pretty much a guy that carries out what The Rock tells him to carry out, right? So like I mentioned, Roman's motivations don't matter because he pretty much falls in line to the High Chief the same way that the Usos fall in line to him. You know what I mean? There's a pecking order right here. A lot of people said that Roman Reigns looked like, the little brother. This is the first time that we saw Roman Reigns look smaller than somebody, and not just in actual physical stature, but in aura. That's because that's the point. That's who The Rock is. They're about 13 years difference, but it ain't an age thing. It's an OG thing. The Rock is the guy, and he is the High Chief in that family, right? So check this timeline out. Now that you got the motivations down, check this timeline out. This obviously starts back in 2020 when Roman came back at SummerSlam. He attacked Bray and Braun. We see this new little heel turn, this first little inkling of a heel character for Roman Reigns. During that week, he aligns with Paul Heyman. About a week later, he beats Bray Wyatt to win that Universal Championship that he's held since then. This is 2020, he's held it. He beat Bray at WWE Payback. And then between then and Hell in a Cell, this is when he forces Jey Uso to pretty much get down or lay down and acknowledge him as the tribal chief, acknowledge him as the head of the table, you know what I mean, as the breadwinner for their family. So, and then fast forward to November, he beats Drew for the WWE Championship. So now he has both of these titles. That WWE Championship, by the way, is the one that he beat Drew for, is the one that Cody wants, right? It's not the Universal title. It's the WWE Championship. So tracing that lineage all the way back, Roman has held the title that his father never held since November of 2020, right? Throughout 2021, we saw pretty much the bloodline dominate, right? Jimmy Uso got down, so now we have both of the Usos are there, and they're doing their thing the entire year of 2021. So let's fast forward past 21 and get into 22. This is when Cody Rhodes returns back to WWE, right? WrestleMania Night 1, he beat, you guessed it, Seth Rollins at WrestleMania, and he goes on to beat Seth another 2 times at WrestleMania Backlash, and then in that Hell in a Cell match where he tore his pec. Crazy ass match, obviously. I think that was a match that Meltzer rated 5 stars. But after that match, he beats Seth 3 times in a row, and he goes out. He's out for the rest of the year, after those 3 matches. So he's not there for the rest of the year. But if we fast forward to September, this is when we see Solo join the Bloodline, right? And a couple of weeks later, Roman says something to the effect on SmackDown, I believe it was. He says this to Solo. They're out in the ring. He says, the elders may have sent you, but you answer to me now. So acknowledge me. Like I mentioned, all of this is on TV, and this is cute. But who do you think the elders are, or the elder that sent Solo Sikoa is? The High Chief. The Rock. Why would The Rock send Solo Sikoa? Because he's protecting his investment. The Rock isn't getting in there and wrestling anybody on a regular basis. The Rock isn't wrestling anybody since John Cena. But The Rock, as the high chief, the guy that really runs this family, while he's off in Hollywood, he's just making phone calls. He's calling Paul Heyman. He's calling Solo Sikoa. Go up there and do what I need you to do. I need you to be the enforcer. I need you to be the guy that has no emotion, that just does exactly what Roman tells you to do, but most importantly, what I tell you to do, and that's protect my investment like a real high chief would, right? The Rock sent Solo Sikoa. I'm telling you. Fast forward to 2023. This is last year. Cody returns from his injury, he declares for the Rumble, and this is when we first hear him say something about finishing his story. He breaks down how his father never held the title, yada, yada, yada. We already know that. Then he wins the Rumble. He eliminated Gunther to win the Royal Rumble. He picks Roman Reigns. He says, got to finish the story against you. So we go to WrestleMania. The investment of Solo Sikoa to protect Roman Reigns pays off because he's the one that attacked Cody Rhodes and cost Cody Rhodes the championship and saved, most importantly, saved the championship, not for Roman Reigns, but for the bloodline, the Anoa'i family, Samoan dynasty, and for The Rock's interests, right? I sent Solo Sikoa to protect my investment, and that paid off. But if you think about it, all of that had to happen. There was already interference, by the way, from the Usos, from both brothers. Jimmy and Jay both interfered. But it took the two of them and Solo. Paul Heyman is down there doing Paul Heyman things. It took all of that to secure the win for Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns wasn't enough. So if you think about it, if I'm watching this, if I'm The Rock, I'm looking at everything that I have to do and all of these people that I have to send to protect The Rock. I'm looking at Roman Reigns like, damn, I don't really think you could beat Cody one-on-one. If this was fair, if all things were equal, all things were fair, there was no bloodline, you might cost this family a little bit of bread. You might cost this family some money because you might not be able to beat Cody Rhodes one-on-one and you might lose that championship. Now you've been holding that championship long enough that there's history to be made. We're etching more history, and our family is attached to that history as far as the WWE history books go. And as long as you hold that championship, that's more money and more accolades for our family. Again, think of how important that family legacy is to The Rock for him to bring that family tree out and show it to the world at that press conference last week. Think about that, all right? Fast forward to November, Cody again declares for the Royal Rumble. Now, this year, day one, January 1st, 2024, we get The Rock. He's on television, and this is when we get that, where should I sit? Should I sit at the bar if I go out to eat? Should I sit in a booth if I go out to eat? Or should I sit at the head of the table? I'll stop right there. Think about it. Rumble season, Cody's already declared for the Rumble. Rock already believes that Cody can beat Roman Reigns. He also has to believe that Cody Rhodes is smart. He's the son of Dusty Rhodes. He's been in the wrestling business all his life. He grew up. He has to think that if the same thing happens that happened last year happens at this WrestleMania, that is, if Cody is going to win the Rumble, the same thing is not going to be enough, right? He's probably thinking that Cody Rhodes is going to have a little bit of a plan to get around whatever interference may happen. So Solo Sikoa and the Usos and whoever, or Jimmy Uso at this point, Jay ain't even there anymore. Jay's doing his own thing. That might not be enough. Whoever else I might be able to send, that might not be enough. So The Rock shows up because this all should I sit at the head of the table is irrelevant. It's a warning shot to Roman Reigns, a public warning shot. But should I sit at the head of the table as a question is irrelevant because, again, The Rock is the high chief. He already sits at the head of the table, right? Roman Reigns sits at the head of his table. The Rock sits at the head of the table. It's a big-ass difference. So I'm believing, if I'm looking at this, I'm looking at The Rock coming out here and saying, asking that question as a bit of like a little fire under the ass. Right now, we're in Mania season. And the worst case scenario is Cody wins the Rumble again. Well, fast forward to the Rumble, and the worst case scenario happens. Cody wins the Rumble. He points at the Mania sign. He stares down Roman Reigns up there in the skybox. Now, from here, this is when shit gets a little crazy. You have to understand that Seth Rollins, like clockwork, is an insecure, albeit champion. He is an insecure champion, right? Seth Rollins is also a student of Triple H. Triple H, when he was active, cerebral assassin. He's a thinking guy. He's the guy that's playing in 3 and 4 and 5 steps ahead and figuring out, even though I might not be able to dominate you physically, I'm going to figure out a way to get in your mind. I'm going to hatch some kind of a plan that's going to give myself the advantage, right? You can set your watch to Seth Rollins. Don't forget that he was known as the architect. So even though he's being cheered and he's coming out and playing the clown role with all the, the loud outfits and all of that, never forget that this guy was the guy that stabbed the Shield in the back before when Roman was a squeaky clean good guy. He stabs the Shield in the back and joins Triple H and sits under Triple H's learning tree and learns everything that Triple H decided to teach him. You have to play chess, right? People are wondering why Seth would play himself and embarrass himself as a champion to beg Cody Rhodes for a match at WrestleMania. Because again, like I mentioned, the motivation of Seth Rollins is the main event of WrestleMania. And he knows that as long as Roman Reigns holds that championship, that WWE Undisputed Universal Championship, it doesn't matter if Seth is the heavyweight champion. The main event is going to be the Roman match. Unless you can convince the guy that wins the Rumble that has a guaranteed main event slot against whomever he chooses. If you can convince that guy that has this already contractually guaranteed to pick, if Seth can convince him to pick him, then he is the main event, not Roman Reigns. And that's his only shot. Championship or no championship, his only shot is Cody Rhodes picking him. So that's why he would embarrass himself, because it's really a play. So again, motivation is the thing. So now Cody Rhodes is seeking counsel. He's confused, right? Everything that Seth Rollins says about this is the point I meant to make here. That motivation leads to manipulation, right? Cody Rhodes is being manipulated by Seth Rollins first. He's telling him, you don't want that championship. That's the Hollywood championship. That's the championship that all of the guys that are only here part-time want. That doesn't represent your father. So even though that's the title that your pops never had, this would have been the title that your pops would have wanted, right? This represents the working horse that your father was. This is the workhorse championship, and this is what I've been trying to turn this into since I got here. So you don't really want that. This is manipulation. Cody seeks the counsel of The Rock because he feels he can trust The Rock. Oh, I got a little comment here. Oh, peace to Trey Deuce. Roman took the WWE title from Brock and unified it with the Universal title. I believe I said that. If I didn't, I think I said Drew. You're right. He unified it with Brock, but the bottom line is that he unified those titles a minute ago. But peace to you. Thank you for tuning in. So where are we? We fast forward. Cody is talking to The Rock. We don't know what this conversation was like. All we know is that it happened, because on SmackDown, when Cody Rhodes comes out, he says, I sought the counsel of somebody that you know. We see The Rock come out. We see Cody Rhodes leave. Think about what The Rock would have said. He probably said something along the lines of, yeah, I agree with everything Seth told you. I agree with everything Seth said on TV. You don't want the Hollywood title. Matter of fact, that title doesn't represent your father. Let me take care of my cousin. I'll put him in line. What's the motivation of The Rock? Family. If I can get my family in the main event, that's more money and more accolades. And even if I beat Roman Reigns, title stays in the family. But if Roman Reigns beats me, title stays in the family. All the money stays with us. That's the play. It's to keep the championship in the family and the money and the prestige in the family. So that's why Cody steps aside for The Rock. He still wants the title, but The Rock convinced him that this isn't the right time. So he might have even lied and promised him, think about it, on the phone. He might have even lied and promised him a shot once he beats Roman Reigns. He probably said something along the lines of Cody can have it all, right? Imagine if Cody beats Seth, right? He can have it all. You can unify the championship. It's all about manipulation. So then we fast forward to that press conference. Pretty much everything goes off the rails, right? Cody Rhodes backstage. This is the first time that Cody Rhodes realizes exactly what's going on. He's realizing that he's getting played. Rock comes out. He's here with Roman Reigns. They're talking about it's a done deal. Seth looks crazy, by the way. He's standing on the side. Nobody wants you, bro. Nobody's picking you. Nobody wants to talk to you. I don't know why you're here in Vegas with us, but since you're here, you can watch the Samoan dynasty do what they do. We see the family tree go on, and that's probably when that light bulb went off in Cody Rhodes, above Cody Rhodes' head. He comes out. He says, this is bullshit. And then everything else you see plays itself out. If WWE, like I mentioned, ever wants to make the argument that this was indeed the plan the entire time, you go all the way back and break it down like I just did. The motivation starts really with The Rock. Roman Reigns is just a pawn in The Rock's plan. Cody wants that title his pops never had, and Seth Rollins is desperate and will do anything, manipulate anybody, just like Triple H, old school Triple H, cerebral assassin Triple H. He'll do anything that he can to get what he wants, and that's a main event slot at WrestleMania, and that's by any means necessary. And that, my friends, is episode number 8 of The Signature Move. Once again, my name is A.O. Baker. You can catch me everywhere at I am A.O. Baker. Catch me later on this week with the rest of the Ringside Club. That's on Thursday right here on the same channels. If you didn't catch the entirety of this episode, it'll be live on the podcast feed. There's a podcast feed for The Signature Move, and there's a podcast feed for the Ringside Club. Everything is going to be in the show notes. Make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, make sure you tap in, and I'll catch y'all when I catch y'all, man. Peace. Go watch that Sabre Jr. versus Danielson match too. Stop playing yourself. Peace.